probably went through most of this. You know, some of the things I've done, I did have the opportunity to work on 21 drugs that are in the market. So I've done a lot. I guess I started in the 80s, so you know I had the experience of when all those drugs were coming out, and I got lucky. So it was a lot of fun. I also have a lot of experience in dealing with governance, and I'll talk about that a bit. And I mean pharma governance. So how does actually decision making happen in a pharmaceutical company when it comes to R&D spend? And then also worked with CROs and sponsor relationships for 10 years. So I worked with pretty much, you name the big CRO, I've worked with them. And so, you know, I know their pluses, their minuses, and I'll talk a bit about that in some of the later slides. And by the way, my company, my little LLC is Keynote Terps. So Terps are the Maryland Terrapins. So I'm a rabid Maryland Terrapin fan, so that's what Terp means. I want to start with a paradox. So I just came up, like I looked at R&D spend last year, and I just did the average of the top 10 companies. Top 10 companies spent $10.1 billion in R&D. Now that's broken between discovery, clinical development, and medical affairs. But again, $10.1 billion, that's a big number. That's a big number. And if you break that down a bit, you look at like traditionally 40% of that's in the clinical development space. Okay, so again, big numbers. You're talking $4 billion. But why can't we then implement digital strategies? I'll talk about some of these elements around this wheel. Why can't we implement those digital strategies effectively when there's $4 billion available? I'll tell you why. I'll give you a real experience. My last job. Okay, smaller company, Eaton Stroman Merck is healthcare. The R&D spend was one. Maybe I'm not allowed to say that, but it was. Oh yeah, I can. It's public. 1.4 billion was my last year. Okay, 1.4 billion. Do you know how much we had in IT to spend on innovation? 15 million. So we had $15 million to spend on innovation. So you know, go down from 1.4 billion down to 15. That's an amazing shrinkage of opportunity. And so we were always fighting for every penny when it came to implementing innovative strategies to accelerate drug development. So it was really a challenge. I don't think people see that a lot because they see especially when I work with companies now that I work with, most are health IT companies. They see Pfizer, they see $10 billion, or actually I think they were $11 billion. And they just see big dollar signs. I'm like, oh, no, that's not the way it works. It's a lot more challenging than that. So if you're thinking about why are these strategies not implemented quickly, it's because the cycle times are long and the dollar amounts are small. Actually, I want to go back on here. So on the digital strategies, this is kind of my agenda on the side. I want to talk a bit about some of the areas where I think we can make some quick inroads and where there is a lot of opportunity. So I'll be talking about diversity, I'm talking about AI and ML and clinical practice, digital endpoints, decentralized trials, and recruitment and retention. So those are the areas I'm going to talk about. When I think about access to diverse patients, it's a long road. In 2009 is actually, I put the 2010 there, but 2009, I was the very first pharma diversity discussion. So we talked about how do you bring more representative populations in the U.S. into clinical trials. We talked about engaging communities, churches, local businesses. We talked about engaging diverse HCPs. We talked about lots of different strategies and the impact. Did this just go up? And the impact was
no up here.
Oh, dead battery.
Because your technology.
Exactly. The technology killed the battery. But yeah, so we talked about it, and the impact was marginal. It was truly marginal. In fact, I would say it was not impactful. I will say that in the 2020s, like the 2020 area, there was a lot more emphasis. FDA started coming out with guidelines around this. There was a lot more data-driven approaches. So there's a lot of companies out there that provide data-driven approaches to find diverse patients. And I think that that is a good path forward, but it's still to be seen. I'll give you some experience. This is recent, 2019, real world example. I was working in SLE. FDA wanted to represent the populations. They said, try to get us 10% into your clinical program. So we got 9% at the end of the day. We went to Mauritius. That's how we got all of our. Were they African Americans? That's what we were asked for. Probably not. But that's how we got our diverse population. And so we had to use a different strategy that was not really the correct strategy, and really we didn't even meet the base minimum. Well, it wasn't a requirement mandated by regulation, but a requirement that they wanted us to provide. So again, there's a lot of challenge here. My opinion is that the answer lies in community-based trials. So how do we bring, if you think about the US, let's think about the US specifically. You know, depending on what numbers you want to believe, 20 to 30 million patients are in underserved, being served by free and affordable clinics and are considered underserved. They're in shortage areas, they might not have insurance, they might be have low insurance, and there's like 20 to 30 million of them. If we can bring them into the network, they're untapped. They're not part of any clinical trial you would run. You bring that kind of community into the clinical trial network, I think there's an opportunity there. And there are companies out there that are trying to accomplish that. So around AI and ML, it's funny. When I was working, so I'm semi-retired here, but when I was working, probably every day, I got an email saying I have the best AI, ML, NLP solution that you can come across. And I would get millions of these emails about AI and ML, so I didn't know what was real and what was not. What I did know, that I focused my organizations in a few areas, and we tried to drive, solutions to make an impact. And one of those areas was in methods to predict outcomes. So how do we use data really to predict more effective outcomes? So we did a lot of good work at Pfizer was on looking at investigative site health. So meaning who was more likely to have a negative outcome if they were audited by FDA. So that was one thing we did. That was quite a number of years ago, actually. I've done a lot of work in accelerating and automating routine activities, again, using AI. And I think there's some great opportunities now where you're seeing TLF production, the tables and sticks and figures, being automated. And again, that's an area where I've seen some substantial inroads. And then generative AI to really develop some of the quick answers especially for investigative sites. Because that's where often there's a lag where you'll get a question from a site coordinator. It'll have to go to the CRM, it'll have to go to the medic in the sponsor company, then go back through that trail. And by the time that question is answered, the patient's gone somewhere else. So again, that I think is another area of opportunity. I did want to bring up culture because I think that in all of these areas, focusing on culture is probably the most critical piece. Because if I take the first example, when we implemented predictive analytics, everyone wanted to know, was it correct? Or was it right or wrong? And I was like, well, it doesn't matter, it's directional. But they wanted a yes or no, a 1 or a 0. And so changing the culture and getting people to realize that, okay, you went to the site and you didn't see this even though it was predicting it. It doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means that there's a higher likelihood. And so that cultural element was an area where we spent a great like over a year on educating our organization on how to use this data effectively. So again, don't underplay culture, because I think that's one of the areas where the penetration of that technology into the company is most effective when you have the cultural elements in mind. I talked about digital endpoints, and I've had some conversations already in this meeting about digital endpoints, but this to me is an area where there's huge upside potential. If I look at digital endpoints, you're getting accurate information, not subjective. I'll use an example with Celebrex in 1998, but you're getting patient-centered data, you're getting speed in the collection of that data, and you're getting cost reduction potentially. I don't think that's there yet, but you have the potential for cost reduction because you're going to eliminate some of the labor costs that get put into investigator grants. But again, this is a huge potential for me, but I think there's a long road here. If I go back to 1998, I worked on a product called Cellerex, and you know, it was discovered by a guy named Phil Needleman, who unfortunately passed away this weekend. But you know, this was a wonderful, you know, drug. It would be, I was working at Searle, we were going up against the U.S. Merck. We beat them to market, we beat the expectations of industry, and we focused on ACR 20. That was our big endpoint. And if you know ACR 20, it's about assessments of joints and a lot of function. So I just looked in the last approved RA product. It was a generic for Humira, ACR 20. The same exact endpoint that we did in 1998. And then I think about function. I think about this thing on my arm. And I guarantee you this thing is going to tell me a sufficiently more, you know, informed information than you know, someone spending 15 minutes looking at someone's walk, assessing different functional you know, outputs. So again, digital technology, digital endpoints to me is a great opportunity to drive, you know, better outcomes for patients and faster decision making. So decentralized clinical trials, that was another area I wanted to talk about. In fact, you know, this is what David's been driving in the conversation, but, you know, isn't it this opportunity? So, you know, I was working when COVID happened. You know, our entire life changed. We use a lot of decentralized clinical trial technology and you know, kind of meta site from Science 37 kind of, you know, approach, and it worked. You know, we kept moving we kept moving everything along. Now it's retracted. Now it's gone backwards. It's gone back to our traditional way of working. So my question is this a missed opportunity? So I thought, okay, let me ask, you know, GPT-4. I asked them a question. Tell me the best DCT providers in 2023. It gave me an article with 148 plus best decentralized clinical trial vendors in 2023. Now let me go back to that comment I made about those emails. You bring 148 companies to me as like an opportunity for me to invest in, like from a company perspective, never gonna happen. I'm like, what? Get two. I went two. So you know, there's a lot of complexity and a lot of overlap in this space. So again, that's an area where I'll kind of put this in my summary slide, but it's an area where I see convergence as a possibility. And then I also asked a follow-up question. Tell me the services offered by these vendors. So the top three were patient recruitment, home health care, home right services, plus 12 other services. And when I looked at them, when I went through the 148 best clinical trial, document and started reading it, I was just like, wow, what are these guys trying to solve for? Because it was all over that. So again, this area with decentralized trials, I think, has great potential. And I'm not saying it's the wrong thing to do, it's the right thing to do. But industry has to start driving for more definitive providers that can give services to deliver better outcome. Now, recruitment and retention. My last topic, I'll summarize and we can go to Q&A. One of my favorite topics. So, if I think about how often I was in front of, the CEOs of companies, so there was two reasons why I was in front of CEOs of companies. So if I was in front of me when I was working at Pfizer or Golden Giro when I was working at Merck, it was always, why aren't we recruiting fast enough? Or why are we spending too much money? Those were the only two questions that I got. I never got like, hey, you guys did really good. It was always just quarterly beatings on cost and on speed recruitment. So, I think there's great opportunities, and I know there's some CRO folks in the audience, so I'm going to direct this to the CROs. I think the CROs have, if you think of the Sony example, they have all of the elements of the iPod. All of them. If I look at IQVIA, I worked with IQVIA quite a bit, I'm probably not supposed to say company names, but, you know, I'm a retired guy, so I can do what I want. If I look at IQVIA, they have everything you would need. They have everything. But they can't sell it to me in a bundle. They sell it to me in pieces. And they just add more and more and more and more cost. And then what happens when the project team starts looking at the budget? Eliminate that, eliminate that, eliminate that, eliminate that. And so the opportunity to actually have a meaningful impact is managed by, $20,000 increments. So again, they have the opportunity. I don't want this to be a chronic moment for them. I don't want them to go to the wayside of I only sell FTEs. I think CROs need to start thinking about selling data. Selling less about FTEs and more about data services, more about technology services, more about innovations that allow you to make better decisions. They have a huge amount of data. They have all of our data. They have the operational data, they have the clinical data. That's where there's a great opportunity. So if you're working with CROs, help them align their incentives. Because often, like if you look at IQVIA, the IMS group has the data, the clinical services, the old Cundowns group, is where the FTEs are. Those two groups meet at the CEO level. You got to push them to bring their data into the conversation. So again, focus on aligning incentives and then making those connections, pushing them into the areas where they can provide value to the project teams. Then my last slide, just some take-home messages. If you're in the position where you're working with companies, help them drive conversions. How do they work together? Even if it's partnerships, I get they might be different companies, but if we can bring them together and make those connections, I think we provide more value. If you think about like digital endpoints, we need to remove the old endpoint and put the digital endpoint in. We don't need to have ACR 20 and then a watch, because that's just more cost. We need to supplant those so that we're actually just focusing on the digital endpoint itself. So I ask, if you're in academia, if you can write, because there's a little bit of perverseness in the sponsor, because we have a vested interest. But if you're in academia, if you can write several papers that describe the digital endpoints and that can be accepted by FDA or other health authorities, that's great. I was working with SAS a while ago trying to do that. They can. They got the data. They got the data scientists that can do this stuff. They can do it fast. So again, I'm very passionate about that piece of it. And then continue to push. Your teams inside want to take the easiest route. They want to take the route that's less risk taking. Push them. Push them hard. If you're in the position where you can push them hard, because then you'll drive more acceptance, or at least more thought about how we can approach these problems differently. Because if you're working in clinical operations, I guarantee you, your clinical trial manager is going to be the most conservative person you've encountered. I manage these people, so I saw it firsthand. And so with that, I want to say thank you. I'd love for David to come up and start facilitating some dialogue, and hopefully it didn't take too much time.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Thank you, John. Your round of applause. Thank you. Wow, beyond the hype, and that's exactly what this series was about, was real-world applications, the mindset from those who have been doing it for many years, and that's really what we wanted to see here, so thank you, John. Yes, please hold your questions. I know there's a lot of questions, but we will have Q&A from the audience following our panel discussion. And so I think now we are going to take a 5-minute break. So enjoy some more sunyao food in the back and some drinks. And some wonderful conversation. Thank you.